Good evening and welcome to the Italian Impact Podcast. I am your host, Stefano Mancini, and I am very, very pleased and very humbled to have a wonderful guest today. He is an Oscar and Emmy award-winning filmmaker. He's done short films, long films, and we're going to talk about some of his career, obviously, and keeping with the theme of the show, he might be Italian. So I'd like to welcome to the show Anthony Giacchino. Anthony, come va? Come stai?
Bene. And thank you very much for the pronunciation of the name. I mean, as you probably are aware, we don't have the most, let's say, they're definitely melodic, but they're not the easiest to pronounce. So it's always great meeting somebody who pronounces the name correctly.
I'm telling you, I make it a point now, ever since I learned, and I kind of knew this when I was a kid, but I finally realized, like, no kidding, etched in stone, when I went to Italy for the very first time, and that kept saying Mancini, and I'm like, who the hell's Mancini? That's me. Oh, and so I realized we should start pronouncing our names correctly. Now, the problem now is I can't go back and say, hey, everybody, for the last 50 years, you were wrong. I want you to call me this. So it's like, it is what it is. So, no, Anthony, I was going to say, welcome to the show, man. I appreciate it. And I actually appreciate the recognition on the names. Again, we're doing our best here to make sure that we get a little bit of credibility as Italians and teach these dang Yankees how to pronounce our names once and for all the correct way. So, again, appreciate you coming, buddy.
That's right. And, before you started recording, I was also impressed that you called me Little Jacket because, that is what Giacchino means. It means little jacket. And I learned that when I was actually in Germany. It's kind of a crazy story, but, my second language is German, not Italian.
It's interesting right off the bat, Anthony. What are you doing to me, man? We're on an Italian show. Come on.
I know. Well, you sound like my relatives in Italy. But I will tell you, it was an Italian. It was actually, he's a very good friend of mine now. But we met at this German language course, and he's the first one who told me, "Oh, your name means little jacket, Giacchino." I'll tell you why it's German and not Italian. And simply, both of my parents are born here in the United States. My father's father, okay, so that's Giacchino, John Giacchino. He was born in Philadelphia in 1905, right? He was possibly, his mother was pregnant with him when they came over from Sicily. They're from a small town called Caccamo, which is outside of Palermo. It has, I believe, the best preserved Norman castle in Europe. It's definitely an amazing town to visit. So my father's father was born in Philadelphia, 1905. My mother's family came from Abruzzo, and both of her parents were born in Abruzzo and came here in the 1920s. So I did grow up with, an Italian imprint. Not the language, but certainly Thanksgiving was not only turkey, but also there was always a pasta dish,
Yes,
some kind of a pasta dish there. But, and then there were, obviously accents in the house all the time from my grandparents and so on and various relatives. But, when I went to high school, which is when we typically learn languages here, as you know, Italian wasn't on the menu. Spanish, German, and French were on the menu. And my brother Michael is 2 years older than me. Okay? So when he was a freshman in the same high school, this is Holy Cross High School in Delran, New Jersey, I watched him as a 12-year-old struggle with Spanish. And my 12-year-old brain told me that Spanish must be a really hard language to learn. I'm never going to take Spanish, right? Not that maybe he wasn't interested, he didn't want to study, it wasn't any of that. I was just like, wow, it must be impossible. So I remember going to orientation the beginning of September freshman year, and I sat across from the principal who asked me, what language do you want to take? And I said, German, of course, because I didn't tell
way easier than Spanish.
Yeah, well, that's what I was like, I'm gonna take German. Well, it ends up that I had the most amazing teacher. He was great. I mean, his classes were fun. He made it fun. And I took it for 3 years in high school. And then he unfortunately passed away, during my senior year. And I thought, well, I'm not going to take it if Deacon Monahan's not going to be teaching it. And by the way, that was fun, but what am I going to need this for? And then, of course, I go into college, and there's a language requirement. So, and I went to Villanova University, and I thought, okay, well, I can take, and they told me you got to take 2 years language, but you can test out of year one, and you can just do 1 year if your second language is good enough. So I took the German test, and I remember Professor Charles Helmetag. I went to see him, and he was going over the results with me. He said, well, you actually you had the lowest score out of everybody who took this test.
Nick sehr gut is what he said. Nick sehr gut.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so I said, he says, well, listen, just take the first year again, and that's it. Or you could pick another language if you want. But I figured, all right, I'll try this again. And yet again, I ended up having these great teachers. And one in particular who ran a summer course in Freiburg, Germany, which is in southwest Germany in the Black Forest. And once I went there and I went on that summer course, I learned what my last name meant. That was it for me. And I ended up majoring in German. I was still a history major as well, but that's what it was. And then I studied for a year in Germany. I had a Fulbright scholarship. I thought I was going to become a history professor. That was what my plan is. And I had a Fulbright in Germany. And when I was there, I started to take Italian. I took a semester of it. And I would go and visit my relatives in Rome. And every single one was like, what are you living in Germany for? Why are you in Germany? I don't understand this. Why, this is kind of strange. And that's actually one of my regrets, is that I just decided, this was interesting because it was German. You're learning Italian in German. But I just didn't stick with it. And that's one thing that I wish that I did. I just sort of focused on my German. And then, so my Italian skills are pretty low. Probably I'd score the lowest again on any test that was given.
By the way.
Yeah.
Well, real quick, though. By the way, when you were telling that story, I'm sitting there trying to just biting my tongue. So I had a very similar experience. I went to a Catholic high school. They did not offer Italian. They offered German, French, Spanish, but they also offered Latin. Latin scared the hell out of me. I don't like the French. Yeah. And I thought, what am I going to do with Spanish? And my brother took several years of German. So I said, same thing. I think I'll take German. Except mine, it was more of an emulating versus I'm scared. He's scaring me away. And it was a very similar experience. I had a wonderful German teacher. I ended up taking 4 years of German. And
oh wow, okay.
And then here's the biggest irony. Then when I went to my undergrad, same thing. They didn't offer German, so I ended up having to take frickin' French. So my Italian came way later in life. I mean, I knew a word or two here growing up. Everybody kind of does if you live in an Italian neighborhood. Yeah. But my ability to actually converse and speak, that didn't come till way later in life. So it was just funny when you're sitting there telling me your story on German. I'm going, yep, I'm guilty.
Yeah, you understand. Well, you're also then reminding me that it's never too late.
No, absolutely not.
To start that. And it is a thing. I mean, my daughter now she's a freshman in high school and is taking Italian. They actually offer it 5 days a week. So I said, I was just like, Stella, I am going to do Italian with you.
Fantastic.
So I'm one week behind though. So I got to catch up.
I thought you were going to tell me, Stella, if you don't take Italian, you're out. You're out of the family business. But good for you. Good for you. No, you know what, though? But I want to go back because you said that your I guess it was your grandfather or great-grandfather was born in Philadelphia, correct?
That's right, in 1905, yes.
All right. So your family was probably immigrated here late 1800s, I'm guessing.
It was my father's family came in 1904. I'm sorry, they came in 1904. He was born in 1905.
Gotcha.
That's when they came in. My mother's family came in the 1920s.
Okay.
Probably like right before the door was shut.
Right, before Mussolini took over and they said, we're no more of these. In fact, that was one of the things that I learned out of the documentary that I just made is I didn't realize even after World War II was over, they did not let Italians immigrate to the United States for 4 years. was like,
yeah.
there was
Okay, so that you're right. That sounds familiar. I wouldn't know the exact dates, but
listen, our people have had a very long history of being, I don't want to use the D word, but there certainly have been reservations on the Italian immigrants and the Italians in general in this country.
Yeah. I mean, we'll probably get into it, but it's a huge part of the story that I'm telling with Petrosino. I mean, without it, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily know that today, but there, the things that they said were pretty horrible.
You're right.
About, these strange people who did not speak English and kind of like, what, Catholics?
We had it all going against us. That's right. We were Catholic. We weren't always blonde hair, blue eyes. We didn't speak the language. It was we were not considered, for lack of a better term, white. Italians were not considered white for a long. I mean, in some places, probably not even now. But people, I don't think people understand that.
No, and it's really fascinating because during that time when we were talking about when they shut the doors, that was 1924. Right, where they basically massively restricted immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe. That the commissions that came out of there was this thing called the Dillingham Commission, which was put together of members of Congress and others to study the question of immigration, and they created a dictionary of races. I don't know if you've ever looked at that or seen that. It was published in 1911. It's really interesting. You can find one on the Internet Archive, the Dictionary of Races, and they very specifically split northern Italy and southern Italy, but they're very distinct, not only in let's say landscape and customs and whatnot, but also in where the people come from and what they look like. You know what I mean? Right. How intelligent they are. So this was very much in this era of social Darwinism and eugenics, that there was, a lot of sort of second, third, fourth looks at anyone who was Italian. So, and that, as I said, sort of plays into Petrosino's story.
And I actually want to jump into that, but I want to make one comment on that, because that just goes to show you the importance of remembering history. Because you look at now, and if you even dare to say, we should restrict immigration, you are labeled. But people act as if, Europeans could come over here anytime they wanted. I don't think so. And that just goes to the ignorance of most people that don't understand that immigration was not like, anybody gets to come in from Europe, come on over. No, there was a mass migration, sure. But people forget that was right after a major war. The economies in a lot of these countries were in ruins. And, we were kind of booming in the 20s, so people were coming over here for work. And even then, there were restrictions on them. People did get turned around. Not everyone could just come on in. So, again, this is why we keep, people like me and you are beating the drum going, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. Because if you forget, now what happens is people act like, you guys just had it easy. It's like, I beg to differ. My family came over in the early 20th century as well, by the way.
Yeah. So, but I would add to what you're saying is that before that restriction in 1924, it was relatively easy.
Sure, back then.
To come here. Back before that, I mean, you could. I think probably I don't know what the exact statistic is, but it's got to be around like 70% of Italians that came here came right before that. The door was shut in 1924. Most of the times you could come in, you didn't need a passport, right? You didn't need a visa. You did have to obviously not be sick, and you had to certainly answer questions like, did you commit a crime or anything like that? But that's easy to lie about, right? You could just say, no, I didn't. So and that's another sort of fallacy about this, the question in comparison. You really, it's very hard to compare though today in sort of the immigration discussion with them, because the makeup of it was also so different.
Right.
And yet again, it all plays into Petrosino's story. Even I would say the 1924 restriction kind of grows out of that a bit.
Now, we're going to talk about that story because I absolutely want to hear this. But I want to talk about, you said you majored in history. Let's talk about how you got started in filmmaking, and then let's kind of jump into Petrosini.
Yeah. So. Well, I mean, it's my intention was to become a history professor. That's what I wanted to do, and I did 4 years at Villanova University. I majored in history and in German. I was on a Fulbright scholarship in Germany after graduation, and then I ended up staying an extra year in Germany, and I taught English there and sort of continued the research that I was interested in. But when I came back, or after 2 years, I was just like, my God, am I ever going to get out of school? Right? Maybe I should maybe work a little bit before I go back and
work a little bit. Wait a minute. Work a little bit. You were never going to make a professor then. I'm sorry. I'm a professor. I can do that.
Well, what I mean by that is working towards that degree. And by the way, of course, I was working. I was teaching English over there.
Right.
What I mean is like, I don't want to study anymore.
Right.
Let me just. So I came home in the summer of 94 into 95. Actually, it was a late summer of 94. I was away from 92 to 94, and I was having lunch, of course, in a diner in New Jersey, because that's where you go to lunch, diners. And my brother-in-law said to me, I saw a commercial for something called the History Channel. It's a new channel that they're coming up with. That sounds like a really interesting place for you. So I was like, the History Channel. Well, I was like putting together in my head, well, I like films and I do like documentaries, and I love history. Let me see. So I moved to New York from South Jersey. My sister had lived there, and I stayed with her for a bit. And then friends from high school had an apartment, and I moved in with them. And I was like, my job is to get a job at the History Channel. And this is before internet and before you could just sort of look up and where are they located? I was literally calling everybody that I knew. Now, my brother at the time was working in marketing at Disney. So he had some contact. He had moved actually out to California by that time, but he had some contacts at Disney, and I was asking them. Nobody really knew, and I don't remember how I got this phone number and discovered that A&E Television Networks, Arts and Entertainment, if you remember them. A&E Television Networks was creating this new channel, the History Channel. So I was able to get, probably I found the phone number in the phone book, and I called, and somehow I was transferred to an intern at the History Channel. And I said, hey, I want to send a resume there, but I don't know who to send it for. He says, oh, if you want programming, you should send it to Abby Raven. If you want production, you send it to Elizabeth O'Shea. I was like, great. And one of my other regrets is I don't know what that person's name is, because had that not happened, had he not given me that information, I really wouldn't have known who to send it to. Maybe eventually I would have, but I really do thank that person. And I sent resumes. Programming wrote me back, said, we don't have any open positions. We'll keep your resume on file. And production asked me to come in, and I went into an interview, and they said, basically what you asked me was like, you didn't study film. Why do you want to work here? And I said, because I studied history. You're creating this channel, and they already had these posters up that said all of history all in one place. And I said, and that is what I want to do. I want to be part of that. I would love to be a researcher, sort of what I thought of myself as. And it was a fun interview, and then that was it. And a couple weeks later, I got a phone call, and they said, we just licensed a 10-hour series from Germany called Hitler's Henchmen. And it's all in German. And we need just help in translating, revoicing, all that. Do you want to work? It'll be maybe a couple of months of work. And I just jumped on it. And I worked on that series to help create the English version of it. And then while I was there, I was just meeting other people that like, hey, can you work on this and this? And I ended up there for 12 years. I was at the History Channel, and I, ended by, for many years, I actually ended up producing, and I basically say, my parents were the only ones who knew this show was on the air, because it was a Sunday morning talk show at 8 a.m. on the History Channel. You probably didn't know that, right? you probably never heard. You didn't know the History Channel had a talk show. It was called History Center.
I did not know that. And I tell you what, I watched. Yeah. I still watch like crazy the History Channel. I absolutely love that channel.
Oh, okay. So you still watch? So there was a Sunday morning talk show. We were at 8:30 on Sunday mornings, and basically we would put current events in historic perspective. So, for example, during the impeachment, right, of Bill Clinton. It was like, well, what were past impeachments like? When 9/11 came around, we sort of talked about the history of the United States involvement in the Middle East and terrorism and all of that. And it was an educational show, but it was great because we were actually adding.
I think I've actually seen that show. I'm not kidding you.
The host's name was Steve Gillen. It was sort of a round table.
Yes.
And there would be various guests on. Well, good. So then you and my parents watched the show.
I was number 3 listener. I remember that. I really do. Yes. I'm telling you, I still watch it. In fact, when you say Hitler's Henchman, I know that series. I'm telling you, I love the History Channel.
So that was my, so I worked there for 12 years, and that was my training, and it was. It's so different now today. No, I mean, in those early days, in television in the 90s, it was, today I kind of feel like we're very siloed behind our computers. The fact that you're expected to know how to edit, to shoot, to direct and do all of that stuff, like, as a one-man band, so to say. And, but back then it was different because there were very specific skills. The editing, it was a very specific skill that you apprenticed for. And I loved those edit sessions where you kind of were all in there mixing it up together, creating something. I think that there's less of that today, which is a shame. Right. But I'm very happy to have grown up, let's say, in that time period. And that was my education. It was really by doing. And then by the time I left in 2007, after 12 years, I already had worked on my first film over a number of years, and it was on PBS. It was called The Canyon 28, story from New Jersey. And then I was able to return to the History Channel and do, like as an independent company, films for them. So I covered things like, from Pearl Harbor to the Kennedy assassination to Oswald's assassination, all of that kind of stuff.
So you don't focus on just Italian American. You're all over.
No,
you're all over in a good way. So you're all over the map. Yeah. I say that in a good way.
Yeah, I would say this is that for me to work on something in the best. Most people may say this, but it's extremely important for me to really love the topic that I'm working on. Because then it's less of a job. It's really less of a job for me. And those topics, I was just always fascinated with the Kennedy assassination. With World War II. I always thought to myself, I could probably spend the rest of my career doing stories about World War II because it's just endlessly fascinating. Fascinating.
Now, do you think there is not a sub? It's funny you say that because I too was very fascinated with World War II, and I still have the books I read when I was a kid. Like we're talking 30, 40 years. Well, probably for me, 40 years ago plus. And you got to wonder, is there not some kind of a subconscious? Why did we take German? And we didn't take French.
Well, actually, there's even.
I'm totally kidding.
I understand that, but it's kind of like in that sort of frame right there. It's funny because I was down at my parents' house last weekend, and my mom and my dad, they just celebrated their 63rd anniversary. And she had pulled out her 30th wedding anniversary, and we had written her notes and stuff like that. And I had just come back from Germany for my first trip there, and I wrote on there, and I sort of wrote this little piece. I was like, I can't believe that, I never wanted to fly because I thought that Germans would shoot us down. That that the Germans would shoot us down. And now here I'm going to Germany and studying German and stuff like that. So there's something bizarre definitely going on in the subconscious with all of that.
Well, they've dismantled their 88 millimeters, so we're good. Let's kind of jump in to Joe Petrosino. This is I've been reading you put up a little description out there. And by the way, for the folks that are listening, Anthony's going to give us all the how to reach him and how to learn more here in a little bit. But I want to talk about this story because this is actually a very interesting story. And I tell you what, it was many years ago that I first heard the term Black Hand. And so, I'm going to let you tell this story, but this is just absolutely wonderful, and I cannot wait till you're done with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so you had asked me, you said, oh, so you don't just do things on, Italian-American history. But that's true. I don't. However, this is a story, in particular, the story of Joe Petrosino, that I have been working on in one way or another for the past 20 years. And it's not like I've been, out with a camera and interviewing people for the past 20 years, but it was 20 years ago, it was in 2005, that I was walking with my wife in Little Italy, and I came across this little tiny park. It was called Petrosino. At the time, it was called Petrosino Park. It's called Petrosino Square today. And I was looking at it, I was reading, and I will always stop and read those markers, really, no matter what it is. If there's a historic marker up there, I will go and read it. So I read this. I was like, oh, this is actually a really interesting story. Why don't I know anything about this guy, right? And I'm like, and it said, and they had an old New York Times article printed about him, and it was talking about his funeral, how 250,000 people showed up at his funeral. I was like, what? He was assassinated, and they did what? He was the Italian squad. And I was just sort of really enchanted by this story. I thought, wow. And of course, this is the time, before the internet, really widespread use of the internet. So I just, a week later or so, went to the New York Public Library, and I just started scrolling through old microfilm about him and looking to see any stories. And I quickly realized that, oh my God, this guy was like a superstar. I mean, the press loved him. They loved writing about him, right? And then there was a book by an Italian author named Arrigo Petacco. He had written a book in the 1970s. I read that, and the only thing is it didn't have any footnotes, so there was nothing with source in it, so I didn't really know, what was real, what wasn't real. And then I just decided, I would love to make a film about this guy. A documentary was my original idea, and I just had the hardest time convincing funders like PBS, even History Channel, that this was a worthy story, to do. But I just sort of kept up with it. I ended up through a small group of former NYPD detectives that I met with the intention of just sort of getting their own perspectives on Petrosino and his story. I was curious from the NYPD side, sort of how they viewed him and what they thought of him. Through these guys, I ended up meeting Joe Petrosino's granddaughter. Her name is Susan Burke, right? And she was a school teacher. I think she may have even been an assistant principal at the time at a Catholic school in Brooklyn. And we went and I met her. I went to her after school one day, and I went to go meet her. I had one of the detectives with me, and we were just talking about her grandfather. And she said to me, when my mother died, and her mother would have been Petrosino's daughter, right? When my mother died, she kept everything, because her mother, Petrosino's wife, she kept everything, and then we had this, there was this amazing, gigantic, framed display of one of the newspapers at the time had given her grandmother, Petrosino's widow, photographs from the funeral. She said, we had this display. She said, and I gave it to the guy who cleaned out my basement. She gave this frame to, right? Oh. So I was like, oh my God, why would you do that? I'm thinking this, right? But
and what's his name?
Yes, exactly. That's what I was thinking. Well, so she said, but I think I have maybe one of his Teddy Roosevelt letters here. And then she opened up the schoolroom closet, and she said, can you pull down those boxes? There were like 4 or 5 boxes, and I pulled them all down. And we opened them up, and everything was in there, like family documents, photographs, police certificates, his citizenship papers, every single condolence letter that his wife received after the assassination, the sashes that the different Italian organizations wore in the procession, her funeral veil was in there. His letters that he sent her from Italy while he was on that mission were there. I could not believe it. I couldn't believe it. All of this stuff. There was a letter from William McKinley. There were a couple from Theodore Roosevelt. And she just says, I've always wanted these materials to go in a museum. And they're sitting here in my school. She's like, if you want to take them, you can take them for your project. And I was like, oh. And I was sort of really like shocked by that. So she got up, and I can't remember why. She left the room, used the bathroom. I don't remember. And I turned to the former detective. I was like, I can't take this stuff. This is crazy. I mean, he's like, take it. Take everything. She offered it to you.
Before she changes her mind. Yeah, before she changes her mind.
He's like, just take. So when she came back, I was like, that's a generous offer. And I said, I will make sure that these end up in a museum somewhere. She said, I'd love it to be in New York Historical Society. Okay, so I spent a whole year, right? So now this is so that happened, I think that I met her in 2008, right? So I spent a year digitizing everything, right? Because I could only just do it on my own at home, and I was digitizing the whole collection. And then I got a call from the New York City Police Museum, and they said, we're coming up on the centennial of his assassination. I understand from Susan Burke, we tracked her down, that you have all of her material. Would you like to curate an exhibit for us? And then I did that. And so I was deeply, deeply involved, in Petrosino's story. And then the exhibit was only supposed to be up there for a few months. They premiered it, or I guess opened it in October of 2009. And then it's sort of, I kind of, not that I forgot about it, but I was like, I've got an exhibit, right? I have an exhibit at New York City Police Museum. Isn't that great? And then in 2012 or 2013, I got an email from a filmmaker saying, did you digitize that material? Because everything I understand was lost during Hurricane Sandy at the New York City Police Museum. And I was like, what? So
no, it's in my basement right now.
Yeah, but the thing is, it wasn't. Everything was there. Everything was there, kind of ready, packed up to go back to and I'll just, because this is going on way too long, but it's almost as long as I've been trying to do this. It took about 10 years basically to kind of figure out where everything was, because it is true that the New York City Police Museum, which was downtown, the museum itself was just damaged, and they had to box everything up, and they put it in various storage units. And over the years and COVID and all of that stuff, everything sort of is slowly coming back together now. And I almost have everything again. So, to say that I'm dedicated to making sure that that stuff gets in the museum, I kind of sometimes think of myself. I mean, I always think of that line in I can't remember which of the Indiana Jones films is, where he's like, it belongs in the museum,
The Last Crusade.
Yes, The Last Crusade, exactly. Yep. So that's how I feel about all of this stuff. But I've been able to just tell I think I would say a more personal story having that material.
No, I was saying I want to make a comment, because when you said this whole thing starts with you just reading a sign and going, that's kind of interesting, and all of a sudden you're on this path. And if someone like you doesn't come along and do that, these things get lost. And I'm going to give you one example. So I just released a documentary. Well, one of the individuals, she was a daughter of one of the prisoners, and she makes the comment that her daughter goes to school, and the teacher says, where did your father, did he fight in the war, and what did he do? And she says, well, my grandfather was a prisoner in America. And the teacher says, you're dumb. There were no Italian prisoners in America. They were our allies. And she says, and she calls the mother and says, hey, what are you teaching your kid here? And the mother says, no. My father was a prisoner in America. You don't know this? So they didn't even know that Italy for a few years was actually an enemy of the United States, then surrendered and became an ally. And by the way, to our comment before, a lot of people don't know, we know the Germans were here, but there were 50,000 Italian POWs in America alone, and 1,250 of them were kept right in Chambersburg, PA. So again,
I wasn't aware of that.
No, but
I'm glad you did that film.
These little details in life will be lost, but there's such greater stories behind them. Like you said, this Joe Petrosino, a fantastic story. By the way, when does it come out?
Well, I mean, so that's well, hopefully not in another 20 years. So basically, because I had, well, you know what it is, trying to make a film and stuff. I had a hard time just financing it, to sort of getting the backing to tell the story. So after 20 years, right, I did have a number of interviews, and I had so much material that I decided, you know what, I'm going to make a podcast of this. I'm going to do I'm looking at, I figured I could probably do 5 hours on him because I have so much to say. Plus, thematically, I have different areas I want to explore. So I want to release it as a podcast, which I'm working on right now.
Okay.
For it. And then, it could be that from there we could spin it off, to a film or so. So there's no, I would say, release date on it yet. But, when we're done, your listeners, I can tell them where to go to sort of learn about where they can sort of get involved in looking what I'm doing, because I'm constantly posting stuff about this.
Well, it's funny to podcast stuff because I'm in my 50s, my early 50s, and I will say that I still remember radio shows more. They were on more for nostalgia, and even now I think there's an AM station local that plays a radio show. Like when I say, I'm sorry, like programs that are on radio that are like TV. Instead of being on TV, they would play them on the radio. What would you like, dramas and stuff like that? So a podcast with a story, even if it's for lack of a better term, a series that has a season. That's actually kind of neat because a lot of people don't have the patience to read a book or to sit there and or it's a good story. I can't tell you this in 50 minutes, so let me stretch this out because there's going to be so many tangents. And again, the irony that he hasn't been solved. There's a whole episode or two right there. So where are we at now? So.
Yeah. I mean, thematically, I'm very interested. It's a great immigration story. It's a great story about policing, right? It's a murder mystery.
And it's real, Anthony. And it's real.
Exactly.
Those are the most interesting stories
are
the real stories. And I think people, and you know what, it's
Absolutely.
funny. Not say one other thing, if I may, on the funding, because I self-funded about half of this and I got some donations and I was very appreciative of that. But hey, it costs a lot of money. But the irony is I find the most interesting things are in these stories, not the you know what? Let's reboot another superhero story. That'll show them.
Yeah.
I mean, these stories are incredible, and again, you can't make some of this stuff up. So and the fact that you have to struggle to fund things, I just don't get it. I just don't. Get it.
It is the let's say. It's a constant question in my mind. I often do wonder, why the heck did I continue in this career? Because it's doing these things is. I mean, look, it's not digging ditches,
right?
But it's not easy, right? I mean, it's not easy, and you realize how quickly people love the idea. That is amazing. But they don't want to give you any money.
That's right. Well, because they don't show the return on investment. Who cares? Okay, that's a great story. Anyways, let's reboot superhero. Okay,
Yeah, well, and that idea of the return on the investment. I mean, I've actually made that argument to people also. I said, sometimes there are some stories that are worth telling. That go beyond a return on investment. That you just really should have out there. And I feel like his is one of them.
No, but a good story, you know what? A good story is a good story. And, I know it's a business. I get it. But at the same time, to your point, you would think that, and I'll just be a little bit critical of the Italian-American community. We'll gladly go watch a fictitious, crime movie, about a casino. I get it. It's entertaining. I understand. Mm-hmm. But yet here's a real story. And you don't give, two craps about it. It's like, where are your priorities, people? Because there's 30 million Italian ancestry, in the United States. There's no reason we don't have our own genre of movies and documentaries. There's just no reason.
Well, I mean, I would say some would argue you do with all of the mafia.
Well, exactly. They're all negative reinforced negative stereotypes.
Yes.
But again, here's a guy that fought that in the height of, the beginnings of that, and this guy ends up dying fighting them. But,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yes. I know.
We're on the same page, my friend.
Yes, exactly.
All right, Anthony, before I let you go, let me know, tell our listeners, where can they learn more about this and where can they find out more about you?
They could, find me. People can make fun of it if they want, but I will tell you, I am a big believer and user of LinkedIn. As in terms of some of the social platforms.
Anch'io, see.
Okay, good. So you understand. So at LinkedIn you can find me, and I post a lot about Petrosino there. I also have on Facebook. It's a public group that I've just started about a month ago. It's called True Crimes of Black Hand, New York, and you can just find it on Facebook if you Google groups True Crimes of Black Hand, New York. And of course, because we just got off of that money discussion, I have a Patreon that I'm hoping to raise money for to create this podcast, and that is also True Crimes of Black Hand, New York. You could search it on Patreon there. And you don't even have to pay to be on that one online. I give away a lot of content for free, so you could join up there as well.
Oh, it's fantastic. And again, I do encourage our listeners, we got to support each other. We got to go out there and we got to support each other. And, we're a community we have faced a lot of discrimination. And in my heart, I believe we still do. I don't think, and I will beat this drum as a perfect example. We're the only federal holiday that seems to want to get renamed by people in office. We're the only group that has a month dedicated to it, but yet nobody knows about it. So it's either
again, all of these, I would encourage your listeners to come on over to the websites I said, because these are actually all even part of his story. It's actually, it is, and the Columbus Day holiday it comes directly out of this era.
Yep.
And it's a fascinating story as to why that is. But
even Italians don't know it. Right. And that's the shame, is even Italians don't know it. So how can you fight for something that you don't know? When I premiered this, the film I did on Friday, and I specifically said, if you don't remember your history, someone else is going to rewrite it for you, and they're going to do what they want. So you better start remembering your history, because that defines who you are. So, Anthony, I want to thank you very much for spending some time with me. I wish you nothing but the best. You're probably going to see a few bucks in the till from me, because I'm going to support you, because I believe in what you are doing, and I hope our listeners will support you as well. And if we're not, I don't know, I can't remember if we're already connected on LinkedIn or not, but I'm going to find you when I get home. Perfect. I thought we were. Yeah. But anyway, so I want to thank you again. Listeners, please go support the Italian Americans that are doing things like this. There's enough Hollywood crap out there to kind of, negatively stereotype us. Let's support some positive images of the Italian Americans, the Italian American community in general. Anthony, last time, thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you,
I hope that you and I can talk again, and hopefully one day you and I are going to be collaborating on a project.
All right, Steve. I look forward to that. Thank you so much.
All right, buddy. You take care. And folks, we're going to be right back after these messages. Thanks to Greater Pittsburgh Travel. For any of your travel needs, let Tom and the team at Greater Pittsburgh Travel know, and they'll take care of you. For more information, call 412-331-2244 or visit their website at www.greaterpittsburghtravel.com. For all of your plumbing needs, be sure to try Palucci Plumbing. Nick and the team have decades of experience and will get you back up and running. For more information, call Palucci Plumbing at 412-782-5050. And we want to thank the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. If you're interested in learning more, you can find their contact information on Facebook at Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. Again, thanks Domenica and the team at the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh for your support. And we want to thank La Scuola d'Italia Galileo Galilei, the only nonprofit school in Pittsburgh endorsed by the Italian Consulate. If you're interested in learning Italian or have your children being immersed in the Italian culture and language, be sure to give them a call at 412-404-7070. And that's La Scuola d'Italia Galileo Galilei. We'd also like to thank Chris Gonzalez from the Knights of Columbus. If you have any questions about joining the Knights of Columbus, reach out to Chris Gonzalez at 412-605-9074. All right, folks, welcome back. And again, I want to thank Anthony for just a wonderful conversation. And I do mean that sincerely. Folks, go out there, check out the work he's doing, and let's support him, and let's continue to support all of our Italian-American, directors, producers, especially the ones that are just starting out. We want to support the community. We want to encourage folks to support efforts that show the community in a positive light. And this is a wonderful story. And again, I can't speak high enough to the work he's doing. Again, he's obviously a very talented, director and producer. He's obviously won an Oscar and an Emmy, so they don't just give those away. So Anthony Giacchino, Little Jacket, thank you again for being my guest. And folks, I also want to, give a huge shout out to the people of Chambersburg, PA. I was very blessed to, have been put on a path that ultimately led me to being able to produce and direct this documentary. And the folks in Chambersburg, they just welcomed us with open arms. We had well over 300 people at the Capitol Theater there in downtown Chambersburg, which I also want to mention is an absolutely beautiful theater. It's over 100 years old, restored, just wonderful kind of feel for that old theater look and feel, but yet it's so beautifully maintained and restored. So wonderful theater, wonderful support. Thanks to all the folks that were there. Thanks to the folks that turned out. Again, over 300 people came out on a Friday night to watch my film. I was like, I couldn't believe it when I looked out into the audience, how many people were there. So again, I just want to say thank you. And I want to thank you, the listeners. As always, the fact that you give your time to listen to me tells me you think what I'm saying or that this show is entertaining is important to you. And a lot of people lose sight of the fact that their time is money. I appreciate that. So thank you very much. Continue to tune in. I'll be back in about a week or so, but if I'm not, that's because I am in Italy premiering the film Fedeltà, Soldati Prigionieri. We are going to be premiering in Milan on September 21st, and then I will be premiering it in Rome on September 27th. And then I'm back in the United States on the 29th, and then I'm going to get that film out to more theaters and ultimately on some local TV, if not national TV. We're going to see how I like to say, I've got a few irons in the fire, but the most important thing to me is that this is a wonderful story, and I want to honor all the families and, that participated, as well as honor the folks that helped produce it, edit it, that supported us. Paul has helped us, give us unfettered access to the chapel. Dave, he was wonderful to support us. Dr. Alan Perry, all the folks we interviewed, all these just wonderful folks that supported us throughout the entire production process and even post-production. So I really want to continue to thank them. This is a wonderful film, and it is not because of me. It is because of them and the people I interviewed and the people that participated, and I just cannot wait for you to see it. So again, have a wonderful week or so, and God bless you, and we will see you when we see you.